Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Find Your Model Health, the official podcast for those looking to optimize their long-term health and weight goals and understand how their body really works. I'm your host. I'm Shmaine Linney, a nutritional therapist, integrative health practitioner, and iridologist. And we have a very interesting guest joining us today to speak about a very interesting topic. But before I go on, I must remind you all that the information in these podcast episodes is for informational purposes only and not to be taken as medical advice. Please consult your health practitioner before making any lifestyle changes. So today we have Matt Zemon. Am I pronouncing that correct?
You are indeed.
Yeah, he's on to talk to us about psychedelics. Super interesting. Now, Matt has a background in the effects of psychedelics. He's MSc and is a dedicated explorer of the inner world and passionate advocate for the thoughtful and responsible use of psychedelics. He has a master's of science in psychology and neuroscience of mental health with honors from King's College London. Matt has studied the effects of psychedelics on the mind and the potential for these experiences to serve as a catalyst for positive transformations. And that's what he's here to educate us on today, which is first, Matt, what a career path to choose. I mean, why? Tell us a bit about your story. Was this like a teenage dream or just something you decided needed to happen?
Really quite the opposite. I grew up in the just say no generation where we had drilled into our head that the skillet is your brain and the egg's going to fry on it if you did drugs. And I believed it. I really didn't do any drugs for most of my life. I was not even a big drinker. And some friends invited me to do a guided psychedelic experience about 5 years ago. And in that first experience, it completely just changed the way I look and interact with the world. The big takeaway from that first one is I reconnected with my mom, who died when I was 22. She was 49, and just felt incredibly safe and loved, and realized that, wow, I don't normally feel safe and loved in my everyday life, and what's going on. And then did a deep dive into learning as much as I could about these powerful medicines for learning, healing, and growing and spiritual connection.
So you think to put it in layman's terms, your experience really helped you to take down those walls that you maybe had put up that was preventing you from feeling more at ease in the world and
Mm.
safer?
Absolutely. I think I was scared of dying. I think I was scared of dying young. I didn't believe in any type of God after my mom died, and this reintroduced me to the possibility that there is a higher power, that I'm not alone in this world, that we are all connected, that we're all loved, that we are enough.
Mm.
And those are big. It's one thing to read that in a book or have someone tell it to you, and it's another thing to feel it in your heart and in your bones. And I definitely felt it and
Yeah.
have continued to feel it since then.
So you not think in your experience you were almost connected to a different plane or dimension, or like some doorway was opened for you?
That's truly what I believe, that it's a it taps you into a universal wisdom, and to a higher power in a
Mm.
way that it's very challenging to get there in other methods. You can get there, absolutely. There's ways to get there with breath work. There's ways to get there with meditation. There's way to get there with just prayer by itself. But this technology, these psychedelic mushrooms, sorry, other psychedelics. In my case, it was mushrooms in that first one.
Mm.
Um, have a very consistent way of bringing people to this place, and then they can take that information and use it to transform their lives moving forward.
Yeah, I do have so many questions, but this is a very interesting topic. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions. There is a lot of health practitioners, Aubrey Marcus, many others who talk a lot about psychedelics, even Joe Rogan, and people hear
Hmm.
the words, but they think they know, but they don't know. They think magic mushrooms, ayahuasca, and that's it. So people's education is very limited, hence your book, which we will get into. But I think as well, depending on the individual, I personally think you can tap into that state as well through dreams if you are the type of person to be open to something like that in any way. So I think, like you mentioned, there's meditation, prayer, there's all these different avenues, and I believe dreaming is one of them. But some people want this extra leg up, shall we say, with the psychedelics to help them. Not everyone is totally intuitive either.
I think that's very true. I talked about how there's three different ways that people kind of come to psychedelics. Some
Mm,
say, "Hey, I want a medical model. I want to be diagnosed with something, and then I want to meet somebody in a white lab coat and have an experience where the medicine comes from a pharmacy, and I'm
mm,
prescribed it, and that's beautiful and that's important. And I think the work we're seeing with MDMA specifically and how that should be legal both here and in Canada beginning of next year. Psilocybin's heading down that path with some really great clinical studies, particularly with people with terminal illness.
yeah.
That's a great way for people to meet. There's another group of people, actually in Canada, and you have the Section 56 exemption, which would fall under that category. Others say, you know what, it should be decriminalized. No adult should tell another adult that they can't put nature in their body, and I have full respect for that. And that's just a different model. They want to be able, they don't want to have to tell anybody any reason to do this. They just want to be able to do it. And the third model is kind of the religious freedom model, particularly here in the States where our country was founded on religious freedom. Most of our states have religious freedom clauses in their constitutions. Um, People believe that psychedelics have been used for thousands of years to connect to a higher power,
Mm,
and that they should, and that many cultures have used different psychedelics based on what was available to them. And that in the 200 some psychedelic churches there are now here in the States, that's pretty much what they're saying. They're saying this should be legal. We have freedom of religion. We should be allowed to practice our religion any way we wish. And I think all three um, ways of meeting the medicine are important, not just not one. And it's an and they all should work together.
mm. In Vancouver and Toronto, as we kind
Hmm.
of touched on before the call, they've decriminalized psilocybin here and potentially coming to a few other cities. It's been my observation that people who do use psychedelics in Canada, it's more so, apart from the natives, but the rest is more the medicinal use, even down to the CBD and oil. It's not so much the religious or spiritual, but more that medicinal use. And I have not personally heard of churches in Canada, and that could be because then we brought in the legalization of the CBD and marijuana, and different states, like we mentioned, or cities playing around with decriminalization. That could be that prequel that it's coming to all of Canada or all the provinces. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, there are definitely some psychedelic churches in Canada. But they're part of the challenge we have in our culture is that we all need to be very quiet about this,
Mhm.
whether it's a gray area, and we believe we're practicing under freedom of religion. There isn't a with just a couple of exceptions. There's not a what's called a DEA exemption for most of these churches to operate, and it means they have to work quietly. And it's unfortunate, in my opinion. In the old days, there was no separation between there was just healer, and part of their job was a spiritual healer, and part of their job was a medical healer. In our Western culture, we have divided those roles where doctors are really supposed to be pure science, and priests are supposed to be pure spiritual. And I can understand the argument when people say, well, if you were to put psychedelics in the hands of priests, well, they might not know as much about my brain and my body to keep me safe. And I can understand that argument. And conversely, I can understand, well, if you put psychedelics in the hands of doctors only,
Mm.
they don't understand enough about the spiritual practices that surround this, and how to work with these different energies that come up. And I can understand that argument. So I believe that it's time for a reconciliation between the spiritual and the medical, where they both adopt best practices from the other, learn from each other, and just find more ways to get these medicines into the hands of people who need and want them.
There's a long debate to be had there on the financial aspect and
Mm-hmm.
whether they want people getting their hands on them. I do believe there are some great practitioners out there who are open to the idea of herbal medicine, but there's also the other. I mean, it's a complicated topic, and as much as we would like everyone to unite, it's unlikely it's going to happen. But for those, let's just take a step back because not everyone's in the know. What are psychedelics? Some people are like, what are they talking about? What are psychedelics?
Yeah. So when we talk about psychedelics, we're talking about what from the Greek word mind expanding or soul expanding drugs. Most commonly, the ones that people know are things like magic mushrooms, LSD. Ketamine is the only legal psychedelic in all 50 states. Ibogaine comes from the iboga root, which is more and more common for opioid disorders and some other things. Um, DMT, ayahuasca, the toad or 5-MeO-DMT, from the Bufo alvarius toad is getting a lot more mainstream press these days.
Oh, that makes
Beautiful.
me
Why
laugh.
does it make you laugh?
People, you see pictures of people just going around licking frogs, and
Licking
people
the
don't
toads.
even know what the frogs are as well. I'm like, this is going crazy now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then there are literally hundreds of other psychedelics that most people don't know. There's a person named Sasha Shulgin and his wife Anne, who have two books, P-Call and T-Call, where he actually documented what are a couple hundred of these psychedelics, how they make him feel, how they make her feel, how they make his testers feel.
Mhm.
And that's out there but those ones I just mentioned are kind of the most common. And they range from we'll start with the toad, which is I don't know, 10 to 20 minute journey. Ketamine's 40 minutes to an hour. Psilocybin or magic mushrooms is maybe 6 hours to LSD, I don't know, 10 to 12, depending on dose and setting. Oh, I left out MDMA, by the way. MDMA and MDA, very close molecules. But those are right now, MDMA is getting a lot of press with people with treatment resistant post traumatic stress disorder. So people, victims of sexual assault, first responders, veterans, and just incredible results. Just the quick consolidated results after the phase 3 clinical trials. People who, again, nothing has worked, no pharmacological, no talking solution. They took 3 sessions of MDMA with therapy before and after. 67% no longer qualified as having PTSD. 88% had a clinically significant improvement in their symptoms.
That's
So
crazy.
those results are, yeah, they're off the charts. And that's why we expect that to be re-legalized. It was legal up until 1986 here in America, beginning of next year. So it's
So
super
that's
exciting.
they were microdosing in that study?
No macrodosing. Yeah, full doses of MDMA 3 times with therapy before and after.
Okay. But these were being also observed through the study too. They weren't just
Complete is
spent from
phase. Yeah,
willy-nilly.
no. It's a phase 3 clinical trial done in a medical environment with 2 people in the room observing and supporting the participants. Yeah,
Good.
very rigorous trial.
So how do psychedelics work? Do you have the ins and outs that you can explain to us?
Yeah, I can take it at a high level. And it ranges based on which psychedelic, but in broad strokes, what the first thing it does is it quiets down your default mode network. So think about that part of your brain that contains your inner narrator, the part that's saying, "Oh, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not doing enough." It turns that off for your journey. And many people say like, "Oh my gosh, it's just such a relief to quiet down that voice and
Yeah.
not to hear the negativity."
Mhm.
The second thing it does is it allows neurons to fire together that haven't fired together in many years for most of us. What happens as we age, we get into repetitive thinking patterns where we literally are thinking the same way over and over and over. The analogy I often give is imagine a ski slope, and as we get older, we ski down the same track over and over and over to our skis are deep in the ruts, and that's just the way we ski.
Mhm.
Psychedelic puts a new new coat of powder on that mountain. It lights up the neurons in a way that haven't been lit up in a while, and that allows us to remember, oh wow, wait, I can ski over this entire mountain. I don't have to just think this way.
Hmm.
And with that information, we can start introducing behavioral change into what comes after the psychedelics. Maybe for some people that's related to drinking or substance use or eating or depression or anxiety or OCD, any of these things. But having a chance to kind of relight up the brain is really powerful. Third thing it does, it introduces a state of neuroplasticity. So your brain starts growing new neurons. And then in many cases, it connects you to some type of higher power where you feel connected to kind of all things. And for many people, that's that feeling of not being alone in the universe, that feeling of there's something else out there, that feeling that there potentially is life before and after our human existence.
There's more. Yeah.
There's more. There's just more. And yeah, it's really, really beautiful. So then people come in again for all sorts of different reasons. And in a single journey, you can cross a number of reasons. Some people are, oh, I did have this spiritual experience and that was really important. And I was able to process this trauma that happened to me as a child. And that was really important. And I have insight into how I want to move forward with my life. And that was really important. So all of those things can happen. Um, again, that's in big brushstrokes, kind of how psychedelics work to the best of our knowledge.
Such an individual experience. I like how you described silencing, just quietening everything down. And I specialize in nutrition, so I speak to my clients a
Mm.
lot about like the hormone aspect of insulin and just everything being so noisy in the body. And when you quieten everything down, then you can listen to what your body is saying. But in that context of what you just said, is you're quietening the mind down, all that noise, like heavy traffic in LA at peak
Hmm.
time, just quieten everything. And maybe the neurons were asleep because they were not being listened to. There was too much noise, so they just went into hibernation. But now they get the chance to kind of speak up again and remind you of who you are and what you're capable of.
I love that, Shemaine. I mean, I say that all the time, that this is a remembrance activity that I don't believe psychedelics actually cure anything for
Mm.
anyone. They're a catalyst. They're a reminder that you are loved, you are enough. You have a glimpse of this abundant world that we live in that we just don't stop and look at often enough.
Yeah.
Um, and then you talk about for people like eating disorders as an example. I mean, so much of that is the way people choose. And again, you know this much better than me, but in many cases, it's the way people are processing um, trauma or something from an earlier part of life. And then it becomes a behavioral pattern and it ties into a repetitive thinking pattern.
It's a
And
programming. It is
it's a programming.
being programmed. And
Yep.
this was because Monday motivation. This was what I spoke to my clients this morning. Bruce Lipton speaking a lot about repetitive actions is in a lot of ways outside the psychedelic aspect.
Mhm.
It's repetitive actions all day, every day is the only way you can break that reprogramming. Unfortunately, not everyone's going to stick with repetitive actions. But for a lot of people, it can be very helpful. But it is that programming, like the wall we spoke about in the beginning, the programming, the fear that I can't do this, I'm not capable, and psychedelics help us take down that wall. Because, like you said, I agree. I think we can heal everything ourselves. I think we're capable of all of that, but this wall prevents people from seeing that.
That's absolutely right on. And the other thing when it comes to starting new behaviors,
Mm.
they're hard to start for a lot of people. And if it's just a technique, if it's just something I've been told to do, I need to drink more water, I
Mm.
need to walk more. Okay, I know that. Thank you for telling me. I need to eat less calories. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, I know it intellectually. The difference is when you take a psychedelic and you feel, wow, I want to drink more water because I can understand how I am made of the same things that water is made of. I'm not separate. I'm part of. Um, I am nature. And by walking and spending more time in myself, in this bigger thing, that is healthier for this physical body in which I'm containing. I know it inside my body now, and it's no longer a technique. It's something I want to do. And I think that's just so incredible. And we're talking about eating now, but the same thing applies to people who want to stop smoking, or people who want to stop using opioids, or people who want to stop drinking, or people who want to stop gambling, or people who want to stop sex addiction. I mean, you name the behavioral pattern that someone's trying to stop doing, and this can be very effective for them. And not for everybody, by the way. We didn't cover that, so let me just jump on that for a second. My book is called Psychedelics for Everyone. I don't mean everyone should take a psychedelic. There are definitely people who are taking certain prescriptions, who have a schizophrenic background or have different mental health challenges in their background that don't make them great candidates for psychedelics. What I do mean is that everybody should understand how they can be used potentially for themselves, potentially for someone they love, or for society as a whole. And then with that information, we can normalize the conversations, and really conversations, not just about drugs, but about mental health, about well-being, about stigma, about how we look one way at a drug user, and a different way at someone who's an overeater, and a different way at someone who's addicted to gambling or pornography. And how we look at someone, oh, this person is depressed and can't leave bed. Well, oh, whoa, but oh, here's someone who's manic but is a successful business person because they just won't stop working. In both cases, they're not living life. They're living a version of
That
life.
race almost.
Yeah. But we judge them very differently.
As well as how we judge people who are taking medications, but they're prescribed. Oh, that's okay then because it's prescribed. So we have different opinions of the same condition, but yours is prescribed and yours is maybe from an underground basement somewhere.
Right. And then and just to touch on the fairness of that. I mean, I'll use ketamine in the States here as an example. It is typically $500 to $1,000 a session. Insurance isn't going to cover it. And for those who can afford it and can afford those first 6 sessions of ketamine to get dosed up, and then whatever frequency, once a month, once every 2 months, once every 3 months that their doctor prescribes them, that's amazing. What an amazing medicine. But there are others who can't afford that, whose $6,000 or $3,000 is outside. And maybe they go into nature and they find mushrooms growing in a cow patch somewhere because they can. Is there any reason to judge that person who's chosen that path for their healing differently than the person who can afford the prescribed ketamine? So just, again, things to be aware of: access, privilege. Getting caught with mushrooms as a Black or brown person in America is certainly a probably a tougher sentence than being caught with them as a upper middle class white person.
Yeah. So users, but not all equal. What about age? Because you have spoken about this is not for certain people. What about age? Do you have limitations on what you would say is a safe age in the lower limit and also in the higher limit?
So the word we use a lot is risk reduction. All drugs, and I'm just going to stay on this for just a moment. All drugs have some risk associated with them. You can overdose on Tylenol. The difference often between medicine and poison is your dose. There's a study by Dr. David Nutt in Imperial College where he said, let's forget how drugs are classified and just look at the harm to self and the harm to others that these things do. And on the far left, the most dangerous drug that he put on his chart was alcohol. It's a 73 on his scale. On the far right-hand side, all the way down, is mushrooms as a 6. I think LSD is a 7, MDMA is a 9. Are there risks? Of course. Relatively, when these can be used responsibly and can be used relatively safely. So now you talk about age. Researching psychedelics has been tricky. It's been hard to get our governments, both here in Canada and the States, to approve. So the researchers have gone for kind of right down the middle, adults without any mental, for the most part, without any mental health challenges, in kind of a mid-range of adults. That being said, the typical age that someone has their first psychedelic is like 14. In many indigenous cultures, certainly in Native American culture, in many of the cultures in Central America, South America, they're starting ayahuasca and peyote and other substances very early, and they've done this for thousands of years. So I don't think indigenous people would keep using these substances um, if lots of people were getting hurt by those substances.
Mhm.
Um, in the ceremonial space that I kind of spend more of time in, we typically say 18. If you're going to come into ceremony, you should be 18, and you should do it purely of your will, not because your parents want you to. It's because you want to explore this world yourself, to understand yourself better, to have this transition into adulthood and figure out what you're going to do for the rest or for your next part of life.
Mhm.
On the upper end, it gets something that gets a little tricky is just the is blood pressure. So things like MDMA and MDA, which increase blood pressure, is sometimes harder on older people, sometimes harder on people who've had cardiac events, sometimes harder on people who are dealing with thyroid issues and potentially weight issues. But I've seen people as old as 80 in ceremony um, who have been using everything from MDA and MDMA to psilocybin to Bufo or the 5-MeO we were talking about before. So I don't know. I'd say 18 to 80 comfortably, and beyond 80, depending on that person's health. One more super important point for anyone considering psychedelics, especially any of the underground psychedelics or even medical tourism. I can't recommend enough the Spirit Pharmacist, Dr. Ben Malcolm's consultation services. He's a PharmD, so a doctor specializes in psychedelic pharmacology. He'll look at your personal medical history and
Okay.
have a 30-minute to an hour consult with you privately, not trying to sell you anything, and talk to you about what might be less risky than for you. And maybe you have to taper down on an antidepressant, or maybe you have to remove a supplement, or maybe you're fine just as is. But he will help you through that as you're trying to figure out what you want to do or what is safe for you to do. So
Okay.
I highly recommend use his consult services or someone
I,
like him.
yeah, I will put his details in the description, but it almost sounds like to me that there may be some contraindications with some psychedelics if someone has chronic hypertension, systemic inflammation, potentially obesity, because obesity is a driving factor for all those. So you
Mhm.
definitely should consult with someone before taking this next step. Yeah.
And then also, especially with the youth. So sometimes, so if we talk about things like schizophrenia and bipolar, a lot of times those are going to appear in the 18 to 25-year-old zones.
Mhm.
So if someone has a family history of schizophrenia or bipolar and is presenting with depression, it's probably not a good zone to, it's probably not a good time to try a psychedelic. Maybe with the exception of ketamine. Um, but if you're 60 and your brother had bipolar or schizophrenia and you've had no
Issue.
reason to believe that you have that, I don't see why there's any reason why you can't
Mm.
experience a psychedelic. Bipolar actually super interesting. Dr. James Fadiman talks about this a lot. How there's numerous Reddit boards in the bipolar community who talk about, okay, we're going to do psychedelics, but not in a manic phase.
Mm.
But when we're in other phases or the other phase, we can do a psychedelic. Again, no, not a lot of research to support it, but citizen scientists out there talking about their experience all the time.
Which are real experiences nonetheless.
Totally real. Mm-hmm.
So what you said about the research, the cohorts that you just mentioned a few minutes ago, they were what would be considered normal healthy. They would almost be a placebo group. Like they should have had another group that did have the mental health issues.
Well, and let me be clear in that there absolutely are groups, studying like treatment resistant post traumatic stress disorder. So
Mhm.
yes, that there's definitely been studies with depression, studies with anxiety. There's not a lot of studies with bipolar. There's not a lot of studies with autism, actually, as an interesting one. But there's some beautiful work being done in the autistic community with psychedelics. University of Toronto actually is, I think, taking the lead on this. Coincidentally enough, Shemaine. And I'm thinking of two particular individuals in the autistic community. One who said, actually three. I couldn't understand emotions from other people. I couldn't read their faces until LSD. It unlocked it for me, and I could understand how to interpret emotions in a way that I just couldn't for the entire time I grew up.
Mm.
Another individual said I couldn't project. I have a very flat affect, and I couldn't project what I was feeling on the inside with my body.
Yeah.
And LSD opened it up for him. And it's super interesting when we think about autism and the repetitive thought patterns that go into some pieces of that.
Mm.
Um, but again, not a lot of research exists, but it's starting. And that's so incredible that after 50 years of this prohibition, which shut down so much research, that it's all picking back up again. And we're finding new, I mean, that we can see why this is the biggest change in mental health since the creation of the antidepressant 50 some years ago.
Mm. And these people, from how you're describing it and what we've already mentioned about the walls and the doors, a lot of people with autism and even ADHD and
Hmm.
ADD, they will express that they feel trapped inside their own mind. They're just trapped. And as we mentioned, taking down those walls, and you said opening the doors, it's amazing that psychedelics have been overlooked for so long, and it's almost an epidemic in itself, the amount of children being born with these issues now. Yet we're looking that way instead of looking that way.
We spend a lot of time looking out instead of looking in. Actually, I've been thinking a lot about these days and how much time we are. It's like it was like something's wrong with us. I don't feel well, and I'm going to a doctor and asking them to give a prescription to you. I need you to change the way you interact with me to make me feel better. And I think that's just wrong.
Mm,
It's I need to change the way I perceive our conversation. I need to change the way I look at myself. I need to change the way I listen to you. Um, and it's all me, not you, that needs to change. And I think as a culture, we're spending so much time right now talking about how to get others to change to make me feel safe.
mm.
And I think it's a never ending game of tag that we're going to be playing, that there's always going to be people. If we're going to give somebody, we're going to hand our agency over, you are now responsible for my well-being.
Mm.
I don't, that doesn't sound okay to me.
If only.
Um, if only.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm responsible for my well-being. I'm responsible for my happiness. I'm responsible for how I see the world. I'm responsible for the love I give and the love I receive. And you might say something that I don't like, but that's probably not because you are trying to be mean or that you're evil. You're saying something because you're misinformed or you're not awake or you're not aware. And I need to be able to
Maybe you're
understand that.
triggering something inside me that I already have an issue with, which is a big thing that I say, if someone insults you or they're talking behind your back, you're not the problem necessarily. The problem is you have opened up something inside them that they're insecure about.
Of course. Of course. Yeah. And that they might not even know the words on where that fear, which is what drives most of this fear and scarcity, um, where that's rooted from. But when when an emotion happens, when the heart hurts, when the body aches, when the throat closes up, that is your body responding before your brain is caught up with it.
Mhm.
Um, and I encourage people in again the spiritual world. It's like, well, look, this is not about them. This is about you. You are scared of something. Your body is triggering something. And what they said just brought it to light. They are working for you. They're your allies in this weird way.
Mhm.
And then you have a choice. You can spend the time and dig through that emotion, try to get to the root of it and try to heal that and move forward. Or you can blame them for saying something that
Here.
made you feel this way.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that then puts your learning, healing, and growing in somebody else's hands. And it doesn't belong there. It's in your hands.
It's such uncomfortable work to do, though. It's so uncomfortable on a level that it entails being strong and courageous and fighting those inner demons, but also becoming humble and realizing, well, maybe I wasn't right, or maybe I'm not all this like I thought it. Like, it's such a challenge. And I say that from personal experience. I'm constantly saying, you know, like maybe I'm not this and maybe I'm not that. And it's constant inner battle. And half of my battle outside with my clients is like, I can give you all answers, but I can't do the work. I wish I could do the work, but I can't. But I did, as you were speaking, I had listened to one of your previous interviews and you mentioned loneliness, which as you were speaking, it came back to me. And I can honestly say, I'm never really lonely. Sometimes I'd like someone to talk to, but in realistic senses, I'm never really lonely because I'm very much, well, there's always someone with me. I really feel my grandparents are always with me. Of course, my God is always with me. I'm never really alone. I always have myself. Like you hear the kind of age-old cliche of I'm my own best friend. I don't know if I'm my best friend. Sometimes I'm my own worst enemy, but I'm never really alone. And sometimes I laugh when I talk to myself because my mom would always say, if you talk to yourself, it's a sign of madness. But I'm like, no, I'm having real conversations here. But yeah, loneliness, back to what you were saying. I don't want to go on much more. You speak on loneliness.
Oh, I love everywhere. I mean, you just covered so much ground in what you just said. In Western society, a lot of us wake up, we eat breakfast, shower, get in a car, we go to work, and that for many of us is not fulfilling work. It's the work we need to do to put a roof over our head and to eat. But many of us don't love that work. We don't look at our colleagues as, in many cases, as our true friends. They're our work friends. They're people we pass the days with. But they're different friends than the friends on the outside. We come home, we're tired, we spend some time with our family, we might eat, maybe watch a TV show or two, and we go to bed. And we do that the vast majority of our lives. We get some weekends off, we get a couple weeks, 3 weeks a year, whatever that is, maybe some more up in Canada. But we don't make the time to live in community, to raise a barn, to share, to develop friendships as we get older. I mean, in many cases, many of our friends are from high school and college when we had more time. Again, not speaking for everybody, but in brushstrokes. And for many people, they feel alone. And sorry, I just described people who have families, but there are people who absolutely live alone and they don't have anyone. They come back to their house, maybe a dog or a cat, or maybe not. And and they're lonely and they feel disconnected and they feel isolated and they don't have that relationship with God that you talked about. They don't have a relationship with nature. They just feel alone. And I think this type of psychedelic medicine can first show you that you are connected to everybody and everything. We are all each other's brother and sister. We are not separate from the trees and the grass and the animals. We're a part of nature just like they are. When we burn down those jungles, we're burning down our own selves in some respects. And not that that's always wrong. It's not always right. It's just we need to have discernment with this. But feeling that connection again, I think can also unlock, okay, I'm not by myself. I am connected and I'm hungry for more love. I'm hungry for more sharing of love. I'm hungry for more understanding about myself. And I think psychedelics really can get people moving in those directions.
Yeah. As you're speaking there about nature, I'm a huge Alice in Wonderland fan, and I'm sure you've heard the stories with the psychedelics and Lewis Carroll and all that. Now, I'm so huge a fan. My house is designed around it. Everyone will tag me and stuff on it. People send me gifts of Alice in Wonderland. Like, I am the Alice in Wonderland. And I always wonder, obviously, that's why I'm so curious, but I feel connected to more than, I don't know if I should, but I do feel, I talk to my cat, now, like, not like the average person talks to their cat, but there's a part in one of the Alice in Wonderland movies that the White Queen was saying, have you spoken to the trees today? They're looking a little bit sad. And she says, well, maybe you could speak a bit more kinder to them. So connecting to that nature, but I will speak to my garden and I will speak to my tree. And I don't consider it a crazy thing. I've no problem making friends. I have plenty of friends, but I like being almost in my inner universe where I have my outside friends and we'll go do things, but I also have my inside friends where I'll go into my garden, I'll talk to my garden, I'll talk to my cat, I'll talk to my my grandparents who passed. They're always with me. So I have that world and then I have my outside world. And I don't think a lot of people have that rabbit hole almost. They don't have that rabbit hole to go down to. They're always talking to the outside world. And the outside world is so noisy and it's go, go, go. It's that rat race. There's always demands on us. Psychedelics being the rabbit hole, not enough people have it. But when you mention connecting to nature, and I know a lot of people love to garden, and I am no way a good gardener, but I suppose I take a little bit of a different approach because I'm so entwined in that wonderland world.
That sounds like a beautiful practice.
Well, my husband's looking out the window saying, there she goes again. She's
Yeah.
crazy talking to the apple tree, but well.
But why not? Why not? It makes you feel connected. It's another way of connecting with those beings. I mean, it is really wild when we look at how smart plants are. A couple of different things I'll point out. One is that there's a person who makes essentially a radio that clips on to these two electrons, can clip onto any plant or tree, and it essentially has the plant create music.
I've seen that, yeah.
So cool. And if you get too near the plant, it makes a different noise. If someone who doesn't like comes near the plant, it makes a different noise. If you cut the plant, it makes a different noise. The other thing about just the intelligence of plants, they have trained it just like the Pavlov experiment with the dog, where if you ring a bell, you can teach the dog to salivate. Well, they've taken plants and had and put water underneath one part of the root system and not water under the other, and watch the roots grow to get the water. And if they put a sound where the water is, they can remove the water and just play the sound, and the root's going to grow to that sound, thinking there's water there. So cool.
Because water has its own sound as well.
Water has its own sound, and that the plants have an intelligence without necessarily having a brain. And yeah, I think again, it's beautiful things to think about, things I never thought about pre-psychedelics, but
and maybe they do have a brain, we just haven't discovered it yet.
There we go. It's a different type of brain.
We don't know.
Yep.
So before I let you go, I do want to discuss microdosing a little bit.
Sure.
I am going to direct people towards your book, so we'll add that in at then. But I have a lot of clients, which is almost everybody at this stage, that have some sort of adrenaline and anxiety issues. So I do know people, no names, no sources, but I do know people who are microdosing and they swear by it. But I have a lot of clients that are not microdosing. And when I say they're really struggling with anxiety, they're really struggling with anxiety. Like they barely are getting through their days.
And how's the microdosing been working for them?
So the ones who are microdosing, they said, oh, it just changed their lives. They feel more capable, they're calmer, they're able to get through their daily lists. It's just that silencing that we spoke about, taking away the noise, and now they can just focus on their list. And we know ticking off lists makes us feel more accomplished and we're making progress. So there's the loop happening. But I have clients who are not using it, and some of them are not even sleeping more than 2 hours a night. So,
all right. So let's back up and talk about what is microdosing, and how do you do it? What do you do it with? And what does the research say? So for those who don't know, microdosing is when you take a 10th to a 20th of a traditional dose. So something that would be either sub-perceptual, you don't consciously feel it, or maybe sub-intoxicating. You feel it a little bit, but you can still function in your day. If you're in that world of sub-perceptual, sub-intoxicating, that's probably a microdose. And when people talk about microdosing, they're mostly talking about mushrooms and LSD. Yes, you can microdose with other substances, but for the most part, these are the two primary ones. And mushrooms probably more than LSD, just because they're so much easier to get. When you microdose, people do it for a number of reasons. Sometimes they do it for anxiety reasons. They want the blues to be a little bit bluer, the gray to be a little less gray, to feel a little bit less socially awkward, to feel more connected to other people. Sometimes people do it to enhance their creativity or their problem solving skills. And the research is kind of split. There's some research that says, yeah, it does all these things. And there's other research that says, nah, it's just a placebo. Um, there isn't any research that says it's dangerous, though. So that tremendously dangerous. So for the most part, if it's something you're feeling drawn to, it is on the risk scale, it's a pretty low risk activity to try. Again, not encouraging them to try anything, but on that scale, it's low risk.
Mhm.
When there are two primary ways that people actually microdose. They can follow Dr. James Fadiman's protocol, which he says take it on day 1, still in your body on day 2, let it wash out on day 3, do it again on day 4, and do that for 4 weeks. Take a couple weeks off. Paul Stamets, who's a famous mycologist, he says that's too complicated. Take it 4 days in a row, take 3 days off, and then every 4 weeks, take a couple week break. He then goes and says, oh, and by the way, add some niacin and add some lion's mane, and you will not only have the traditional psychedelic effects of connection, creativity, problem solving, you'll also help your dexterity and your memory. And he has that stack of psilocybin or mushroom with lion's mane and niacin is generically known as the Stamets stack.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things on the internet about exact proportions and how to do that. Many people start with psychedelics by microdosing. They're like, oh, I don't want to, these antidepressants aren't working for me anymore, or aren't working for me, period. Or I don't like the side effects of these antidepressants. And I want something that has very few side effects. And I want something I don't have to put in my body every day. And I want something I'm not going to be addicted to. And I want something that I can make myself or I can buy inexpensively.
Or is more natural.
Or is more natural. Yep. Good point. And maybe that's where they start with psilocybin or mushrooms with microdosing. For many people, they can be on an antidepressant or tapering off of an antidepressant while doing psilocybin. More than 50% of the population, it can be a straight dose. Maybe another 25% needs a little bit more psilocybin, but they can do it. And so for people tapering off of antidepressants, it can be an extra piece of scaffolding that helps them do that. For some people, they have to taper off before the effect works, and just and maybe ketamine becomes an option for those people, or they just do it naturally. Dr. Ben Malcolm, going back to the Spirit Pharmacist, he's got a whole guide to tapering that's free on his website. Highly recommend it. I think what else is important on microdosing?
Well, it sounds like it's a lot of trial and error as well. There is going to be no one shoe size that fits everyone.
Yeah, the joke is to make sure you start your first microdose on a Saturday, and typically start smaller than you think. So maybe 100 milligrams or 0.1 to start. See how that makes you feel. Maybe then 0.15, 0.2. But do it on a Saturday in case it's more than you expect, so you're not having that experience while in the workplace. But once you find your dose, then you can repeat. You can make your own capsules. You can buy capsules from a variety of people, and then you should be able to follow either of those protocols with success.
Well, I've taken up a lot of your time, but one thing just popped into my head right there before I let you go is, for people who are microdosing, have you heard of any not even anomalies, any interactions with hormones, increased cravings, which we would associate with THC, any changes in that aspect where someone says, well, I've been microdosing for so long, but I swear my sugar cravings have gone through the roof, or I'm gaining weight, or my cycle has changed, or anything like that?
I really haven't. I heard recently about someone who had some liver enzymes increasing, but I haven't seen that in any research. That was more of an anecdotal report. But the side effect profiles from microdosing is very minimal. I mean, we talk about people I think are so used to antidepressants where And what some antidepressants, 73% of the people who take them have some type of sexual dysfunction. It's a
Mhm.
huge number. Weight gain, lethargy, suicidal
Constipation.
ideation,
Yeah.
palpitations. It just we're just used to a lot of side effects. So when people are like, "Well, there's mushrooms have less side effects," they have a lot less side effects.
Yeah.
Just a different, it's a whole different ball game. The other thing that I think people don't know, or on antidepressants, if they're not working for you, that's normal. It's not you're failing the medicine, it's the medicine failing you. They only work in like 40% of the population.
Yeah. Mm.
So it's so don't feel like you've done something wrong if you've now tried multiple antidepressants and it's just not working for you. Um, I think that's okay. I think the success rate on mushrooms seems to be higher, but again, the research is out on the microdosing. Oh, and then that's the other thing. So I was saying some people come to microdosing because that's where they want to start. Others have done some type of large dose experience, whether it's a ceremony, um, a big set of ketamine doses, something,
Mhm.
and they want to have scaffolding after that experience. So we recommend typically take a couple weeks beyond. So you've done your ceremony, you've done a big dose of mushrooms. Take a couple weeks off, integrate, let it process, then start your microdosing as an additional scaffolding for your integration support. So as you think about what types of behavioral change have you introduced, how are you keeping track of what your goals are, um, that it can be a help for that process. But that's another way people find their way to microdosing.
Like a transitioning aid or phase.
Yeah, they've done a big one. Now they want to do some microdosing, and then maybe they stop it all. And
Mhm.
that's beautiful. Or maybe they decide it's going to be a part of their life on some frequency.
Mhm.
That's okay. But it's not the same type of frequency of an everyday or every week or every month. I think many people do some type of psychedelic experience quarterly or once a year or um, on just special episodic experiences.
Mhm. Well, it really is a fascinating topic, and hopefully, a lot more research starts to be proactively done on this. Like sharing is caring.
Mm,
But you, in your sharing methods, have created this book, Psychedelics for Everyone, which is a guide. Am I correct? It's a guide to kind of go into more depth on what we just discussed and helping people understand psychedelics and how it may be helpful for them.
yeah, absolutely. When after my first experience, I realized there's a ton of information out there, but much of it is written for people with a medical background. I didn't have any science background, and then some of it's just so far out there. I just didn't know what to believe, and so I wanted to put a book together that had some of my personal stories, that had kind of an introduction to psychedelics, and then they had different experts weigh in on different aspects of these different types of psychedelics. Um, but then I took it a step further and went and had every chapter medically reviewed. So just so that people can read this book and read whatever pieces of it are relevant to them,
Mm.
and trust that the information they're getting is accurate. It's not too technical. It's not too opinionated. It's not too out there.
Yeah.
And I hope I hope that's the feedback I'm getting, whether people read the book or whether they listen to the audible book, is that it does that. But I certainly hope it continues to do that.
Well, the Amazon reviews are looking pretty good from Canada's side. And one thing we didn't mention, and just for the people who have stayed till the end, which is hopefully everyone, that psychedelics can also be beneficial for pain. There is a lot of antidotes and some published papers around cancer treatment and psychedelics being beneficial and even end of life as well. Because I know we have people who listen who are going through those different scenarios. And psychedelics, we didn't specifically mention pain, but can be helpful with pain.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research on cluster headaches or migraines with psychedelics, and then the ability to alleviate some of those symptoms. Yeah, so lots happening in the pain world. And again, particularly with ketamine, legal in all 50 states. I think it's legal across Canada as well, with a
Some
prescription
parts,
and
BC,
some.
it has definitely been more open to a lot of
Mm,
changes. Even heroin has been allowed
hmm
in some areas of BC. So we'll just wait and see what happens. So where can people follow you? Where can we get your book?
My book Psychedelics for Everyone, or my journal Beyond the Trip for Preparation and Integration, are
Oh,
available
goodness.
anywhere that books are sold. And then the Audible of the Psychedelics for Everyone seems to be very popular. It's wild to me. I had no idea that I would be selling more Audible books than print books, but people like the Audible.
Easier. You can walk and listen, you can drive, you can be vacuuming your house and you're listening. So yeah.
Yeah, I've learned that lesson. And then the mattzemon.com is my website. I answer anyone who has questions, who puts them in there. It might take a minute, but I get back to everybody. I'm truly just trying to get information out there and point people in safe directions, to as much as I'm able. And then I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and certainly appreciate people who reach out in either of those modes as well.
Great. And for our Canada listeners, the Canada bookstores can be hit and miss, but Amazon has both of your books. I've checked, so I'll share those links below. But otherwise, this has been really fascinating. So
Shemaine, I appreciate you bringing this on and bringing this to your audience. The work being done with behaviors around eating and psychedelics is just tremendous, and hopefully, your
well,
people found it interesting.
mental health is our biggest challenge when it comes to all of
Mm-hmm.
it. So this is that rabbit hole that hopefully will help some people start talking to more trees and stuff.
There we go. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Shemaine, thank you.
Thank you.